We always hear of equality and often speak about equality. But do you know that true equality comes when everyone has knowledge? I hope you're rocking our January well so far. Good morning and welcome to another interesting episode of the Women Empowerment Program, still sponsored and organized by the Rule of Law and Empowerment Initiative, also known as Partners West Africa Nigeria P1. I remain your host, Nkem Okereke. And also here with me, my co-host, Ijoma Ibe. Welcome, Ijoma.
Thank you, Nkem. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the show.
Our guest for today is the Executive Director of Education as a Vaccine, an organization that works with young people to advance their right to health and protection from all forms of violence. Previously, she worked as the Program Coordinator for Nigerian Women in Agricultural Research for Development. And prior to moving back to Nigeria, she was in the Darfur Dream Team Sister Schools, and she was a program manager at the Enough Project, a project of the Center for American Progress to end genocide and crimes against humanity. Stay put as we'll come back with our guest.
Welcome back. Our guest holds a bachelor's degree in Global Policy Studies at Chatham University, Pittsburgh, PA. She also holds a master's in International Peace Studies with a focus in development and peace from the University for Peace in San Jose, Costa Rica. Welcome, Olabukunola Willams.
Thank you.
You're welcome to the show, man.
Thank you.
We are so glad to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Ma. Okay, so we're going straight to the first question. And Ma would like to find out what is education and how can it be linked to human rights and empowerment of women?
Great. I think, the first thing I would say is that when we think of education, we think of school, right? We think of going to school, going to primary school, secondary school, university, getting all those degrees and certificates and things like that. But I think at its very base, what you're talking about is knowledge, which is something that you mentioned. So it's really about knowledge. What do you know? What do you understand? It's also about having access to information as well. So being able to process information, being able to understand how to utilize it. Because the important thing is not just about learning, which education is a critical part. It's also how do you synthesize that information and use it for yourself and use it for society around you. So it's really important. So it goes beyond just literacy, knowing how to count. It goes beyond just knowing how to read, because all of those are critical, especially in today's society. Not knowing how to read is a big problem, because you need to read documents, you need to read things that affect your life, you need to be able to know how to count. I think we take it for granted, those very basic things. But for me, when we're talking about education, it's the really bigger picture of saying not just that knowledge is power, but information is power, but more importantly, how you use that knowledge, right? That's why we always talk about critical thinking skills, so that when somebody gives you information, you're able to process and say, is this correct? Does this make sense to me? Is this real? Is this information that I can utilize? And especially in this day and age where you're bombarded with so much, information from every direction, from society, in terms of our cultural norms, from religious, houses, like, your pastors, your imams, traditional religion. All of those things, you're bombarded with a lot of information from there as well. From the internet, there's so much information coming in and can come from different directions that can support what you think you know, but actually what you know might not be correct. And so that's why it's always important when you're thinking about education, is that how do you make sure that the education that you're getting is the correct kind of information. And it's very important now as we're living through a pandemic. Really important, because a lot of people don't believe things about the coronavirus. Either they don't believe that it exists, even though they're educated.
Right? I guess it's because they don't know anybody or anybody that is closer to them that has had the disease, or maybe someone have had but they didn't know this was what this person suffered from.
Exactly, they thought it was malaria, or they thought it was cold or something like that. So for me, education is really all-encompassing, and I would argue that it's really the foundation, of how we live our lives.
Okay, so thank you very much. So do you think culture, tradition, religion hinder education of women and the girl child?
Yeah, and I think I'll go back to the parts of the question that I didn't answer around linking it to
women
rights, because I think it really brings out what it is that you're saying. I think, growing up in a country like Nigeria, let's root it in the context that we live in, is that you believe that what is the role of a woman, right? Look at in some of the textbooks that you read, it's always like mommy's in the kitchen,
daddy's in the parlor.
Or, mommy is taking care of the house and daddy is going out to go and work. So does that reflect, the current reality, or the fact that we have a high number of children who are out of school in Nigeria in terms of being able to get access to basic literacy, and a significant number of that, depending on where you read, is girls. Right? And not being able to access education. So when you're talking about rights, it's really important, like, who has, the right to access information, right? And the way our society is set up, because of culture, there's an understanding that it's better to educate a boy than to educate a girl, right? Because the idea is that if you educate a boy, he's going to stay and take care of the family, he's going to take the family name, But a girl, if you educate, she's going to go and be somebody's wife, somebody's mother. So why...
I'm going to be in the kitchen, why the man is in the palace.
Exactly, you're getting it. So why should you educate a child, not going from the basis that every boy and every girl has the rights to access education, so it's quite important to do that. And then also, how would you know the knowledge of your rights if you're not educated? How do you know you have rights? You know what I mean? There's this understanding of us not understanding, how we should move through the world, how we should exist in the world as women and men. And often there's this, way of the way our society is structured, because we live in a patriarchal society in which we say the men are paramount, their rights are paramount, they're the leaders. So we don't believe that we should see women in leadership positions. Right? There's that really big understanding when you say women in a leadership position, that's, why is she there? Like, she needs the guidance of a man to be able to do it. And if she's then married, she can only keep that leadership within the sphere of where she's leading. Because as soon as she enters the home, she should leave that leadership out there and now
face the home
and be in the kitchen. So from what I get now, you say that tradition and culture sometimes doesn't believe that a woman should be educated, even though they also need the information. So what do you think can be done about this? What do you think can be done about this?
Because it always comes back to education. It always comes back to education, which is part of raising awareness. That's one critical part of it. Because I think that the thing that is always important when you have these conversations, because, we have to talk to parents a lot when we're talking about access to education, and not just education in the traditional sense, but also, for example, in the work we do at Education as a Vaccine, one of the issues we talk about is health.
Okay.
and in particular section reproductive health and rights. And that's always considered like a taboo conversation for young people, especially about learning your bodies. So let me even go about the issue of menstrual health. Right? How do you get your menstruation? How does your reproductive system work? When you talk to a lot of very young girls, they have no idea. It's like, oh yeah, is this natural thing that's supposed to happen every month? And when it happens, you just use a pad or you use a towel and things like that. But there's like zero information of what that means. Or if you don't get it on time. So you see the perpetuation of myths of where a girl would be like, you know, I was told that until I do certain things, my period won't come.
Yeah. Meanwhile, there probably be other things that would have caused it from not coming.
Or that if I'm 15 and I haven't seen my period, there's a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Knowing there's an age range in which you can get, you know, your period. So all of these things is really quite important in being able to start to raise awareness about, like, you need to learn about your body. You need to learn about your life. You need to understand these things because that guides how you make a decision about your body. It guides how you make a decision, you know, about your life and all of these things. And so really just explaining and helping them understand why education is important is the really critical thing, and that it's important for all genders. You know, it's not just important for one particular gender. So really trying to change that mentality and understanding is one of the most critical things, because that's always the hardest part. Because you know, when you're talking about tradition and culture, it almost feels like that is what tradition says, so nothing can change it. But the truth of the matter is that traditions and cultures change all the time.
Of course.
They're constantly changing, you know, based on different decisions that are made, based on who is considered to be the power holders.
Of course. Of course.
In terms of those decisions. So this is a conversation that we constantly need to have, because when you now start to show the benefits of having an education, what it means to a household, what it means to a community, what it means to a nation, what it means to a globe. You know, when everyone is educated, you know, not just looking at it from the gender equality lens, but when everyone is educated, that means we're better off.
Of course.
Exactly.
As a society, that means we're better off as a world, because when you start to look at what are the benefits of education, it means people live healthier lives, people make better decisions for themselves, people are able to make choices that are good for them and good for the environment. So all of these things, when you start to put it together, you start to realize that, you know, education is important, but let's just be honest, the type of education is also very, very important, because you can educate somebody to also make bad decisions and bad choices. So we're talking about the good kind right now, like the importance of really providing people the correct, accurate, correct and accurate information and education. That's really what's important.
All right.
Wow.
Thank you very much, Buki. And thanks, everyone, for listening to us. We are going to go on a quick break now, and we shall continue this interesting conversation when we get back from this short break. Please stay put.
Welcome back to the Women Empowerment Program show, and we are still on the topic empowerment through education with our guest, Buki Williams. So, Buki, before we went on for the break, I like the point you made that the education shouldn't just be about gender, but for everyone. And then you talked about culture and tradition that changes. And what I picked was, I just wanted to say, so the more educated our traditional leaders or rulers are, the more the culture and tradition probably will change, because they will probably be for the benefit of everybody. So if, let's say, for example, there's a traditional ruler in the place and he's aware
Mm-hmm.
and he understands.
Mm-hmm.
So he might come in and then change some of the cultures and traditions that probably not be suitable for maybe women and every other person, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So how do we get them educated or aware? So would that mean we have to do like some grassroots awareness or campaign or something? What's your thought about it?
Yeah, so for us, let me just be practical about what has worked, you know, for us, especially because we do work around, like I said, sexual and reproductive health, but also about gender-based violence. And that's one of the hardest things to change, right? Because we have things that are called harmful traditional practices. So for example, let's use the example of female genital mutilation. One of the things we realize is that you're not going to change that until you get traditional and community leaders to adopt it. As well, and to abandon this and to consider it a harmful traditional practice. And so, for example, when you go and talk to communities and say, okay, you know, why does FGM happen in your community? There's various different reasons. They will tell you that, oh, if FGM is not done, which is like literally cutting female genitalia, or sometimes sewing it, different things like that. It's pretty terrible. What they will tell you is that, oh, if that doesn't happen, then the woman would have problems with childbirth. They will tell you that. They will tell you that the top of the woman's labia should not touch the head of the baby. They would give you that kind of reason. That's one of the reasons why you should do it. They will tell you that if you don't do it, a girl is going to be promiscuous. So that's
like the one I've heard a lot.
It would make her promiscuous. Another one is that they tell you that it's part of a marital right, so it must happen in order for marriage to happen. So there's all of these things that they mention. But it's quite important, like when you're talking to the traditional leaders, like you might see it from that perspective, but let's break it down about what it does to the body of a girl or a woman, and to explain that it actually makes life difficult for them, right? In terms of them being able to live a good life. There's medical issues that could come from it. The use of the kind of cutting materials could lead to infections, which could be bad. Like there's no medical benefit whatsoever.
Of course.
In doing these kind of things. And when you start to have those conversations with them, if they even have gone to school or not, there's really this understanding of, really, so what benefits does it bring? Do you know what I mean? And so it doesn't happen overnight, but it's a continuation of a dialogue that happens within communities that then starts to be like, okay, maybe this is not necessarily good for everyone involved. Maybe this is something we should abandon. Maybe this is something we should change. Right? Another thing we can talk about is even doing our work with girl education. So one of the things we used to do in Kaduna State is run safe spaces for girls. Where they come and they learn about their bodies, they learn about their rights, they learn about how to better protect themselves, they learn how to report GBV cases. But one of the things that come from then is that the self-esteem of the girls grow. Because they get to learn about themselves, they get to learn that as a girl they have roles in society that they can take up, that they're more than just going to be the mothers, they can think through their careers and their dreams. And so you see a lot of girls want to go back to school. And now the conversation has to start with their parents, because they think, why should I pay money for a girl to go to school? And during COVID, I'm part of Malala Education Network. And one of the things that came out from the research that we're doing during COVID is that boys get to go to private schools and the girls go to public schools.
Oh, really?
I have not heard this before.
So that's something that came out of the research, and it's stuck with me too.
So they don't want to spend so much money on the girl child, so instead just...
You won't say we did not send you.
And if you look at the amount of time they even had to continue to study during COVID, like their hours of the day was taken up by chores. Housework and all of those things. So in order for us to change that, a lot of conversation needs to happen with parents, in saying that you have to invest in your girls the same as your boys. And the reason for that is not just to think of them as married, but think of like what they're going to contribute to their lives and to their society. And for, having to use, even though we believe in the issue of rights, having to use the language of saying that, if a girl is educated up until secondary school, she's more likely to survive childbirth. you know what I mean, and not suffer from obstructive fistula. She's more likely to ensure that her child lives beyond the age of 5 because we have high child mortality in Nigeria. So really explaining those things, she's better able to contribute to her household and better able to support herself because we know the levels of poverty in Nigeria. So really trying to explain those things, and just anecdotally, we just know that in Nigeria, if you look at, daughters are still supporting their family.
Of course.
You know, they contribute in many ways, and we all continue to take care of our families, not even when we marry or not, all those things. So I think really trying to educate them and help them to understand the reality, you know, and using as much evidence and stories as we can, and the media plays a very important role in this. So, you know, going to the grassroots is, we use theater, we use dialogues, we use conversations, we use stories of girls. All of these things to really contribute to that conversation. And over time, we have seen change. We've seen communities abandon FGM. We've seen parents promise, you know, to take their girls to school and
better school.
Exactly, you know, to do that. So, you know, we just have to start from somewhere, but it has to start now, and we all have to contribute to that and start to even break down those stereotypes. Right, that all girls want to do is that they just want to get married. So what's the point of education?
I think also from the one you talked about, parents, most of the women probably feel, oh, I went through it, so my daughter should go through it. I didn't die. My daughter can as well go through it. I wasn't educated, and I'm where I am today, my daughter can as well. So I think there actually needs to be yes, a proper sensitization, especially with parents, mothers especially. Well, thank you for that insight, Vicky. And then we also have another question.
I know that for when you were talking about the report about some girls in government schools, public schools, while the boys are in the private schools, I can understand that these are the reports gotten from especially the rural areas. And I understand that you are the ED of EVA, Education as a Vaccine. So with everything you're saying, I can understand that you are conversant with, familiar with working in the rural areas. You understand? So I want to understand the challenges of working with girls or the girl child in the rural area.
Yeah. So let me just say that we still see it in peri-urban areas as well. And so that results of that COVID-19 report that was done by Malala Education Champions in Nigeria, it was actually in Kaduna State. So it was not just in rural areas. Yeah, this was actually across the state. So interesting enough, these things do not only happen in rural areas. What we see is that it does happen in urban areas, but happens more
in rural areas.
In rural areas. And so changes needs to happen, both in the urban and both in the rural areas. And of course, some of the work we do is in hard-to-reach places, and we go into rural communities as well. But for me, I think what is always interesting about rural communities is that I think there's always an assumption that because it's rural, that means that they don't keep up to date with what's happening, you know, around the world. And I think we just have to be honest with ourselves that we've seen penetration of mobile phones. You know, we've seen the fact that in rural areas that sometimes even more open to this conversation because they see it happening in their community.
Like every day.
Exactly. So if you go to a community and you're having a conversation and you actually start to explain to them. So for example, when we're talking about the issue of violence, it's not that they don't know that violence is not happening. It's just an understanding of how do you address it and how do you settle it. And that there are ways you can actually ensure that you can prevent and stop these kind of things in your community. Because there's an understanding that this is what happens. It's a household matter. You people should settle
the problem.
Exactly, settle the problem. But when we start to show the scale of the problem, that it's happening in this household, it's happening in this household, it's happening in this household, and this is what we can do to change it. It changes the kind of conversation you know, that we're having as well. And I think it's also something that, you know, when we do a lot of advocacy as well, it's also about pushing the government that we need to ensure that there's development in the rural areas as well. Like, are we investing in them in terms of education?
Do we have schools available for them?
Are we ensuring that the primary healthcare facilities there are adequately staffed and provided with the resources, you know, to be able to do that? And that when we're doing this, are we working with the communities based on what they say their needs are? Because that is always important to us before we do program, is to go and talk to the communities. Like, we're thinking there's needs that happens in these communities, what are you seeing as the issue? And when they start to raise it and you start to have the conversation, it now becomes like, how do we work together to change it?
Yeah,
Because what we're seeing, for example, in Nasarawa State is that we had actually done a project there that was really focused on targeting young people to deal with issues of conflict and insurgencies. And one of the things that kept coming up was that cases of violence was being reported to like the community peace structures, but they didn't know how to address it. You know, they would just settle it, like I said. But when we came in and be like, we can support and train you through another project on like what the different forms of violence are. What is the root cause
of this violence?
You know, how do you address this issue? There are no women in this committee.
And you want to see.
So they're in the kitchen.
You know, and ensuring that, you know, you can include them here because they can help you address
course.
and they can make sure that, you know, all of these issues are being addressed. And so and to be honest, they took it up. And now they're the ones who are taking up cases, reporting cases. You know, we link them to the local government. They're in there doing these things, and they're passionate and connected about it. So for me, I always feel like, you know, when we talk about rural areas, the issue is that, you know, are we having the right kind of conversations? Are we ensuring that we're also putting them in control of the work
of the work that we're doing? Because you don't live there. We come there, we support, we do a project, and then educate you and leave it for you to take ownership
of it. So the truth of the matter is, how do we build stronger partnerships in rural communities with the community leaders, not just the community leaders, people who have influence. Because one of the things I have learned in all of this work that we've been doing is the issue of trust. Because I can come and tell you something. If you don't trust me, it's like, that really is it. Like, you're not hearing me because the frame through which I'm talking to you is non-existent. Because I don't trust you. I don't know who you are. So when we go into communities, is to find out who are the trusted individuals in this community. Sometimes it's not even the traditional leaders. Generous with their time, very generous with their words of advice and words of encouragement. And I think for me, I always hate the fact that a lot of times we think that we think all young women need to be told what to do. And so for me, as an organization that works with young women, the biggest thing I always tell them is trust yourself. You know, trust yourself. You have all the tools and all the ability and the strength and the power within yourself to achieve everything you possibly want. But no person is an island, right? It's about building community. So how do you build a community around you that can be honest with you, that can speak truth to you, but it can also encourage you when you need it, right? And remind you of your own power and remind you of your own greatness. And I think one of the best things that has happened to me is I've always been surrounded by a group of women who always remind me. So that if I'm ever feeling like, I don't think I can do this, the person is just like,
calm down.
My girl, do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? Let me tell you who you are. You know, just remind you of the amazing things that you've been able to do and the amazing projects you've had the honor of being a part of. And just reminding you that, you know, the fact that you're going to face challenges is really just about sharpening your skills and helping you be better. Because by the time you look at 10 years in this work, and there's some things you thought you would never be able to do. You never thought you could write, you know, a 100-page report.
I can't say that.
You never thought, and then by now, like, if it's to write a report, you know how to structure, you know how to get assistance, you know how to get help, you know where to get information from. Like, it's about building yourself. So for me, I often feel like there's so much advice out there. It's an industry at this point, but I think the biggest basis is about saying that even though you are young, you are still very powerful. And you do need to continue to trust yourself. And if you can do that, then that means that everything else that comes at you, you're better able to know what works for you. You're better able to know what will not work for you. You're able to better determine what path that you want and to be able to do that. And so for me, the biggest things I always say is that, you know, just make sure you you make that decision on your own. Don't let anyone make that decision for you.
All right, so I'll have to stop you here, and thank you very much for lecturing us and our viewers. So one thing I'm going to take from everything you said is that education is not about 1, 2, 3, ABC. It's about other forms of knowledge acquiring, acquiring of knowledge, getting the right information to be able to build yourself. And it is very, very good if we want to empower a woman. You know, I don't know, Ijoma, do you have other things to add?
Yeah, just wanted to add on to say thank you very much for the enlightenment. You know, education, like you said, is not just about the book and the pencils. Yes, knowledge is great, but awareness is also key and is also part of education as well. And I like the fact that you just pointed out, as a young woman, trust yourself, believe in yourself, and you have all it takes. All you need is have people around you that will support your dream, that will support what you're doing, and that give you a tap at the back to say, no, you know, do you, like just the example you gave, like when you're done, I'm like, oh, I don't know. Who are the people around you? Are they contributing positively to your dream, or are they trying to drag you down and not achieving? So I just like that point, because so many young women like us who just, you know, yeah, we have the passion, we have the dream, but then the people around us are not giving you the support and the encouragement you need to move. So I like that point very well. Thank you very much for pointing that out. So have women or people around you that will support whatever it is you want to do. And education is not just your book and pen.
Yeah.
It's more, there's a lot more to it, on the awareness creation, you know, reading, and also thank you very much, Buki, for the enlightenment. Thank you.
Thank you again, Buki, for this interesting conversation, and thank you all for listening. Please join us again next week, Friday, same time, 11 a.m., as we discuss another interesting episode. Enjoy your weekend, and see you next week. Bye.
Bye. Bye.